Welcome to the deep dive. For decades, leadership development has been laser focused on this one idea, right? The strength of human ambition.
Mm-hmm. Dream big.
Exactly. Dream big, draft these brilliant strategic plans, and then just hustle to make it all a reality. But what if the very success of that approach is also its biggest weakness?
Right.
We're diving into a really radical body of source material that suggests true, world-changing vision isn't something we invent. It's something much more profound. It's something we inherit.
And that's the core tension we're exploring. Our sources, they fundamentally challenge that whole premise of human-centric leadership.
They really do.
They argue that when a vision is truly sacred, I guess,
Yeah.
when it has the power to outlast its founder and really transform communities, it has to come from somewhere outside our own capacity.
So the whole definition of leadership just shifts?
It completely shifts. It goes from being this performance of ambition to becoming a partnership with divine intention. And that requires, it requires profound obedience and really deep interpretation.
And here's where it gets a little uncomfortable, because the analysis speaks directly to failure rates in these really high-achieving organizations. The sources argue the reason so many brilliant visions, human-centric visions, just burn out or plateau, even when they're led by good, ethical people, is simple.
They start in the wrong place.
They started with human aspiration, not divine alignment. We are, masters of strategic planning, but the world is just profoundly starved for real spiritual direction.
We've perfected the mechanical process of building a platform.
Right.
I mean, we have the metrics, the software, the investor pitch.
All the tools.
We have all the tools, but we often lack that foundation, that bedrock of enduring purpose. And when the measure of success becomes external visibility and metrics, instead of the intrinsic spiritual impact, leaders inevitably experience what the sources call vision fatigue.
Okay, let's unpack that. Vision fatigue, that sounds like burnout, but I'm guessing it's something deeper than just being tired. What causes that erosion of clarity they talk about?
It's the moment when the immense weight of execution, of just doing the work, exceeds the capacity of the original human motivation. So if the fuel for the vision was, say, a desire for personal legacy or fame or even profit, and this can be masked by noble goals, that fuel eventually just runs out.
Everyone thinks you're tough.
Especially then. It becomes insufficient when real adversity hits. The sources describe it as this erosion of conviction that sets in when performance becomes the master, overriding the original spiritual foundation.
Yeah.
The mission just suddenly feels heavy, it feels mechanical, because its source was always temporary.
Okay, so if that's the risk with the human-centric approach, let's get into the alternative our sources propose, this journey from promise to purpose. What's the defining difference between the vision that fades and the one that sustains?
It all hinges on one thing: projection versus entrustment.
Okay.
Human vision is a leader projecting their own ambition, their desires, their capacities onto the world, and hoping that the market or the community validates it.
Right. I have a great idea, and I'm going to convince you it's great.
Exactly. But divine vision, that's a gift of divine entrustment. It's not something the leader conjures up. It's something that interrupts their ordinary imagination. It completely redirects their life. You stop writing the narrative and you shoot. You start stewarding a story that's already unfolding.
That's a huge reframe. Especially when you look at these towering figures from history, their greatest movements were they were inconvenient, unexpected. They definitely didn't start with a feasibility study they commissioned themselves.
Not at all. Take the quintessential example, Moses. He wasn't in Midian having brainstorming sessions about an Exodus strategy.
No, he was tending sheep.
He was tending sheep. And the command to free millions of people was revealed to him through a burning bush. The vision was entirely initiated by an external force. His job wasn't to generate the idea, it was. It was to submit to the revelation.
Or what about Nehemiah? I think a lot of modern leadership programs would frame his story as him just initiating a brilliant infrastructure project.
But the sources insist his leadership began way before any strategic planning. Nehemiah's journey started when he heard about the broken walls of Jerusalem, and instead of writing a proposal, he just wept. He grieved. He fasted.
So it started with a feeling. A burden.
It started with a profound spiritual burden, a divine weight placed on his heart. And that is what transformed a general concern into a concrete, God-given blueprint for restoration and, mobilizing resources.
And the cost of this kind of obedience, it's often overlooked. Abraham's calling, for instance, it wasn't specific at all. It was just Go to the land I will show you. That's a non-starter for a modern CEO.
It's the definition of uncertainty. Abraham's leadership began with this radical, costly obedience to an unseen, unspecified future. That emphasis on action before the blueprint is complete tells us something really important.
What's that?
The foundation of divine vision is trust, not clarity. You're entrusted with the next step, not the full 40-year roadmap.
So if the leader's job is primarily to receive, how do you move beyond just hoping or brainstorming? How do we tune into that divine frequency, as they say, and cultivate that receptive heart?
The leader's primary work shifts from productivity to receptivity. And the sources are very specific about the spiritual disciplines this requires.
Okay.
First, there has to be intentional silence and solitude. And not just, checking your phone less. It's an active posture of listening, of clearing the mental noise that drowns out external direction.
And this receptivity, it's maintained through deep engagement with scripture, persistent prayer, spiritual discernment in community. These are things often seen as secondary tasks in modern leadership.
Here, they're the source of the strategy.
They're the whole operating system.
Exactly. They're the operating system. And what's critical is understanding the nature of how you receive it. We mentioned Nehemiah vision doesn't always arrive as this soaring motivational speech. Often it arrives as a profound burden.
Press on that for a minute. Why is a burden better than inspiration as a starting point? A burden sounds, well, it sounds heavy, difficult.
It is heavy, and that's precisely why. Inspiration is fleeting. It's subject to our feelings, to external circumstances. A divine burden, like Jeremiah carrying the burden of the Lord, or Nehemiah's weeping, that's an unshakable, non-negotiable sense of what grieves God's heart about the current reality.
So it's more stable.
It's the long-term spiritual fuel for perseverance.
Yeah.
That weight transforms the idea into a divine imperative.
Yeah.
And it compels you to act even when inspiration has faded and logic is telling you to just quit.
Okay, that addresses receiving the vision. But then comes this massive translation challenge, right? Moving that nebulous glimpse, that holy burden, into a clear, actionable blueprint that a team or an organization can actually execute.
This is the crux of the practical application. And it brings us to what the sources call the Joseph Masterclass. Joseph received these highly symbolic, kind of vague dreams early on, sheaves of wheat bowing down, the sun and moon. These are personal insights. But his real leadership wasn't in having those dreams. It was in interpreting Pharaoh's dreams of 7 years of abundance and 7 years of famine.
That's the pivot, isn't it? He went from personal revelation to national strategic policy.
He took a divine insight about the future economy and translated it into practical, actionable counsel, a concrete, centralized grain storage plan. The leader's art is bridging that gap. You receive the why it matters to God, and the desired future, but you have to interpret and articulate the initial how.
In language that mobilizes people.
In language that mobilizes people and resources. If the vision stays only in the realm of spiritual inspiration, it's just ineffective.
So once that vision is received, interpreted, articulated, the focus shifts entirely to embodiment. The leader isn't just the translator anymore. They become the living vessel.
And this brings up the absolute non-negotiable integrity. Our sources insist that the power and the velocity of the vision are directly proportional to the integrity of the messenger.
Wow.
People don't just follow a well-written strategy doc. They follow a leader who flawlessly embodies the spiritual foundations of that vision. The second there's a disconnect between public words and private actions, the vision just hemorrhages credibility and momentum.
We see such painful examples of this even in the sacred texts, like Moses. I mean, he was entrusted with the ultimate vision of the promised land, yet his own character failed him at that critical moment.
And Meribah.
He struck the rock out of frustration instead of speaking to it.
Now that's a harsh organizational truth right there. His personal misalignment, his lapse in character and obedience, it didn't negate God's overall promise, but it decisively stopped Moses from realizing that promise himself.
So the vision was too sacred to be carried into its final state by a compromised vessel.
That's what it demonstrates. Character is not a soft skill. It is a hard prerequisite for vision longevity.
And as that vision scales up, because a God-sized vision is almost always too big for one person, the leader has to transition from being the lone vessel to being the catalyst for mobilization.
Absolutely. A true divine vision demands the mobilization of the many. The leader's role shifts from being the sole receiver to being the steward of human potential, empowering every person to find their unique role within that blueprint.
Which means delegation.
But specifically, delegation of authority, not just tasks. That's a key difference.
And if the vision is truly divine, it has to be planned to outlast the leader. How do the sources handle this succession imperative? Because that's often the death knell for so many successful founders.
It's a core biblical pattern. Think of Moses commissioning Joshua or Elijah intentionally mentoring Elisha. These leaders didn't just wait for a crisis to name a replacement. They invested deeply in succession early on, actively transferring wisdom, authority, and spiritual capital.
So longevity is secured by developing other leaders.
It's secured by developing leaders who prioritize the vision over their own tenure.
Now, once it's mobilized, we have to talk about the difficulties, the opposition, the giants that always seem to appear whenever a divine movement starts to gain momentum.
Opposition isn't an anomaly in this model. It's a clarifying mechanism.
Yeah.
The sources argue it's used to test faith and refine the vision.
Okay, so practically, for a leader today, how do you navigate that?
For that, we have to look again at the Nehemiah strategy. His builders faced constant harassment, ridicule, plots, threats from Sanballat and Tobiah.
And their counter strategy wasn't just being resilient, right? It was integrated action.
It was perfectly integrated. It combined persistent prayer, that's the spiritual foundation, with radical preparation. They were building with a sword in one hand and a trowel in the other.
I love that image.
It rejects that false choice between spiritual reliance and practical work.
Yeah.
And more critically, Nehemiah constantly modeled an absolute refusal to descend from the wall to engage with his critics. He knew that engagement was just a time sink designed to halt the essential work.
So the test of lasting leadership isn't just starting something great, but ensuring the movement outlasts the charismatic founder. What are the key elements for sustaining that alignment over decades?
It requires moving beyond the initial excitement to permanent structure. First, you have to institutionalize core values, the foundational principles, not just programs or trends.
Programs are temporary.
Programs are temporary. Values have to endure. Second, you build strong, accountable, transparent systems to protect the vision from drift and corruption.
And what's the third element? It must address that leadership failure point we talked about.
Exactly. Guarding against founder syndrome.
Ah, yes.
It's that pathology where the founder's identity is so wrapped up in the vision that they become incapable of letting go, of delegating real authority, of trusting the next generation. It effectively kills the vision by making sure it always relies on one person. A mature leader ensures their absence doesn't destroy the organization.
If we zoom out one last time, all this effort, this striving against vision fatigue, the integrity checks, the defense against opposition, what's the ultimate context for the leader who feels totally burdened by this task?
The ultimate context is God's eternal purpose, the eventual establishment of his kingdom. Understanding that ultimate end gives eternal significance to every earthly administrative action we take today.
So it's a perspective shift.
It ensures that the leader's focus stays on faithfulness over immediate temporal success. It gives you hope that transcends difficult outcomes or even outright failures in the short term.
That is a transformative perspective. It shifts leadership from a temporal performance driven by human metrics to an eternal partnership driven by divine obedience.
It's about trading that restless energy of striving for the steady, long-haul rhythm of spiritual alignment.
The transformation is complete when leadership moves from reliance on human capacity to dependence on divine power.
Knowing that the source of the vision is also the source of the provision to complete it.
Which brings us back to you, our listener, and the immediate application of all this. We've seen that true vision requires trading, striving for obedience, ambition for entrustment. We want to leave you with this one provocative thought, and it comes directly from the source material. What if the very thing keeping you from receiving the next critical instruction for your organization isn't a lack of strategy or talent or funding, but the delay of obedience to the last, seemingly small instruction you already received?
Oh, that question really cuts deep. It requires us to check our current actions against our past promises. It challenges us to look inward and ask what small step of faithful action is required right now before we demand the next big blueprint.
Take that principle of vision in action, that faithfulness in the small steps, and apply it to your leadership context this week. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.